you afraid that you'll never be successful? What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast, a podcast dedicated to destroying your self-limitations, helping you get out of your comfort zone, and learning to get over yourself. If you don't know by now, I'm your host, Brandon Davis, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome, as well as what defining success inside of our lives looks like. Guys, this is something I've dealt with inside of my own personal life for a long time now. And it's something that we can all relate to. Whether you're going to work, a sporting event, you're going to a local church congregation, anything inside of your life, you can feel like you are not successful and that everyone around you can be successful except for yourself. These kind of doubts we have inside of our life are very common, and I'm going to share today's episode in the hopes of helping you understand that you are not alone on this journey and you can be successful, and you don't have to feel like an imposter when you're surrounding yourself with other successful individuals. But before we jump full force in today's episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast, I wanted to share the quote of the day. Today's quote was actually said by Jensen Huang, and I'm going to be referencing him a lot inside of today's episode. So Jensen, he said, "Success is a marathon that doesn't take years, it takes decades." So once again, in today's episode, you could be expecting the talk of success, what makes you successful, how you can become successful, and how to destroy the imposter syndrome when you know for a fact that you're doing something good and you're headed on the right journey. So with that all being said, let's jump into today's episode. So just a couple days ago, I was sitting in one of my lectures, and this guy, he comes up and he's giving the lecture, and he's currently a Y Combinator for his business called Buster. And he's a really nice dude. I've been connected with him on LinkedIn for a while. He's been able to offer me a lot of good and practical tips inside of my business I'm starting up right now. And when he started speaking inside of this lecture, he was talking a lot about imposter syndrome. Since getting a Y Combinator, he has felt like an imposter because when he got into the program, he said, you look to your left, you're sitting next to somebody, and you look to your left, and it's a Harvard dropout, and they're working on something that's curing cancer. You look to the right, and here's somebody who's working on the future development of foods and how America can be more sustainable. And then you look in front of you, and the teacher is somebody who went on to sell a $1 billion company, and now they're teaching kids like him. And he said when he first got into the program, he felt like an imposter. He was working on an AI tech startup that turns companies' databases into simple to read SQL that you can actually see charts for and understand, and it's super easy to dissect as well as present to other people, especially if you're not a numbers person. You can kind of just see all the data right there on a graph. And so what he's making is very useful, very practical, and a lot of companies are taking behind it. But when he's sitting in a room with these people who are curing cancer, fixing America's problems, sustainability, solving the future food crisis, he's sitting next to these people who on paper are absolutely amazing. Here he is, a BYU graduate, or actually a BYU dropout. He's sitting next to people that went to MIT, Harvard. They were in the business school. These very, very, once again, on paper, these people who seem very important, who are very intelligent, who are very cunning, who are very eager to make a difference in the world. And at first, that made him and his business partner very, very scared because they thought, here we are, compared to a lot of these other companies, a lot of these other people, who are we? So when they first arrived to Y Combinator, they were scared, didn't know what was going on, and they felt like they could not be successful. But now they're a few months into the program, and they recognize who they used to think they're not necessarily competition were, but these people next to them who they thought were so successful in what they were building, or these teachers who were teaching them about various business practices, who had done that for themselves and they were successful in their own outright. And they would look at them and think, I can never get to that spot. Now, a couple months into the program, they're thinking, wow, I actually can get there. These people next to me, we don't have to fear them. We don't have to feel like we're imposters compared to them. We can use them as a resource. We could be friends with them. We could be allies. We could build each other up. And that's exactly at the point they're at right now. And looking back into my own life, I've recognized some of those points as well. I'm in a group here at BYU. It's called Seed. I've mentioned it before on the podcast, but anyone at BYU who has a business, they're allowed to be in this club. And as my business is just getting going, sometimes I look at these people who are college students doing hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue every single year. And I think, man, will my business ever amount to that? And that's up to me to decide. I can't keep looking and sitting around and hoping one day that I'll be able to make a business as successful as some of these other kids. I need to take action inside of my life right now in order to do just that. And so, where in your life have you felt that dying feeling, that gross, icky feeling of being an imposter? Whether it was a sporting event when you were younger and you weren't the best player on the team, whether it was some event at your local church, whether it was in school and you got placed at the table with all the smart kids, but you didn't feel like you were that smart. Think about that. Where in your life have you felt like an imposter, and how did that make you feel? Did you feel like you were degrading yourself? Did you feel like you weren't able to do the same kind of tasks or challenges that the people you surrounded yourself were doing at the moment? Or did you use that to your advantage to push you, to make you work harder, to put you out of your comfort zone? I think that's the key right there. A lot of times we feel like imposters because we don't know everyone's story. I guarantee when people look at you, they feel that exact same thing. If you're a very good author, you're very good at writing books and coming up with stories, you're a great storyteller. You can have your peers looking at you and thinking, I will never be able to be as successful as that person, as you. Maybe you're listening to this podcast, you have a podcast of your own and you go, I will never be able to make a podcast like Brandon did. You have to stop limiting your beliefs. You have to stop acting like that imposter. Use me as a resource. Use those other authors and those fellow people that I was just mentioning. Use them as a resource. Use them as a drawing board. Use them as a guideline so you can take your own idea, your own vision, your own life, frame it like somebody you're impressed with, somebody that you think you feel like an imposter when you're sitting around. Use them as a framework and mold your life after them, but put it in your own spin, your own ways, and add your own story to the book. Because, guys, at the end of the day, we all crave our own feelings, our own journey. We want to be the hero of our own story. Whether you're an introvert, extrovert, doesn't matter. You want to be the hero of your journey. We're all on a hero's journey, and it's up to you to decide if you're going to take the task to go fight your demons, to go fight that inner voice inside of your head telling you that you're not good enough to the people who are sitting next to you compared to them. That's what imposter syndrome comes down to. It's comparison. And comparison is the thief of joy. Stop comparing yourself to other people who are a couple steps ahead of you. Some people learn quicker. Some people get it done quicker. But the real determinant of how you're going to be successful is if you're willing to put in the work. Because time is something you can never take away from somebody, and you can only take it away from yourself. You have to be willing to put in the time and effort. And if you don't do that, that is what will cause you to be unsuccessful. That's where the imposter syndrome comes from. So make sure you're putting in the time and effort, and eventually it will land. It might be more difficult for you than it will for some other people. It might take longer than some other people, but you will be able to get it done. So as a perfect example of this, like I mentioned in today's quote, and I'm going to go ahead and read that one more time. It's from Jensen Huang. And before I describe who he is, because I'm assuming most of you out there don't know who he is, I didn't even know this was the guy's name until last week. So once again, the quote is, success is a marathon that doesn't take years, it takes decades. Success takes decades. It's a long marathon. It is not a sprint. So who's Jensen Huang? Jensen Huang is the founder and current CEO of NVIDIA. And if you guys have heard of them recently in the news, it's because they are booming their business. I think in the past year, its valuation has gone up over $1 trillion. Basically, the reason why we have AI going these days and why it's so fast and so seamless and it works really good is because of these little computer chips that NVIDIA is making. And the reason why they're taking off right now is because so many businesses are relying upon their computer chips. They create a specialized chip, unlike your typical computer chip that would go inside of your HP computer or your MacBook, whatever you use. They create one that's specifically targeted to supercomputing and AI. And so all these companies that are trying to incorporate AI inside of their businesses these days need these chips, and they cannot produce them fast enough. So NVIDIA's prices are just soaring right now because they can charge out the wazoo for their services and for their hardware. And so what Jensen brought up is this quote, that success is a marathon and it takes decades to define yourself. NVIDIA has been a company for over 30 years now. And when it first started, he had no idea what kind of benefits inside of his life and the lives of others it could potentially hold. He had sort of a framework and he was hoping, but he never believed it could actually get as big as it is today. In fact, where he first came up with the name of the company and the idea and thought out all the processes was at a Denny's. He was sitting there eating his pancake breakfast and he came up with one of the world's largest and greatest businesses that is powering everything in our future. Everything that our future holds in store will be powered, at least for now, by these chips produced by NVIDIA. So when he came up with this idea, I doubt he was sitting there thinking like, I'm sure he saw the framework and he saw the idea of how large it can get. But looking back now, this guy's worth $70 billion and he's created one of the greatest companies on earth. And it all started from an idea he had inside of his head at a Denny's. When he was sitting there, he probably looked around. He saw successful businessmen in their suit. He probably, as he went into work on his business, he saw tons of his friends, family members, all becoming successful in their own careers. He probably saw other founders around him that were growing faster, that were experiencing what seemed like their own successes. And I'm sure he had moments of doubt, moments that he felt like he was not going to continue going. But that's exactly what he did. He continued to craft his own destiny. He shaped his path. He molded his success. And once again, like he said, he did not do it in a couple of years. It took him decades, but he was able to be successful. And so I feel like sometimes our definition of success here on earth is who has the most money, who's the most influential, who's the most powerful, who drives the fanciest cars, who gets the fancy girls. What we really need to define success by is our own merits. What makes you tick? What lights you up inside? What gives you joy? What gives you pleasure? Those should be the determinants of success. So my future goals, my success is going to be determined upon how great of a father I am, how great of a husband I am. If I'm able to start this business and create jobs for other people, that's going to be my success story. And I am in the trenches right now trying to define it. I may feel like an imposter sometimes when I'm sitting next to these people creating amazing businesses at a young age. And sometimes I think, wow, I'm never going to be able to do that. Or I hear these mentors of mine getting up and speaking during these lectures. And I'm thinking to myself, no way on earth am I ever going to be as successful as them. That's the inner imposter inside of you trying to defeat you, trying to get you to stop working, trying to bring you down and not allow you to continue to be successful. Guys, my story for you today is the story of Jensen. It may take 30 years to become successful. You may never even become near as close as successful as Jensen is today. But that all comes down to how much you are willing to work, how much time you're willing to spend in the arena grinding for your own success. Stop fearing what other people are doing. Stop fearing what other people think of you and start working on what you know needs to get done. And to close out today's episode of Get Over Yourself podcast, I want to share one final story about Jensen Huang. So he grew up in Taiwan and he eventually immigrated to the United States to do boarding school in Kentucky. And that's kind of where he first started his experience here in the United States. He started off very, very poor. His family spent everything they could to send him to boarding school here in the US. But in order to kind of pay his wages and also put the time in at the boarding school for his duties and responsibilities that he had to get done, he was on cleaning duty. He would scrub bathroom floors. He would clean up the rooms that kids were sleeping in at the boarding school. And he had to do a lot of physical labor. But looking back now, he said that is one of his proudest moments because it taught him the hardships that equated to his future success. So now, as he is successful and he's looking back on his entire journey, he appreciates those moments. In fact, inside of it, this is a fun little quote from him. He says he wishes people well, but he also wishes hardship upon them because it's through the trials that we learn and grow. And when our journey is finished, it will help us appreciate it even more. So guys, when you feel like you are that imposter sitting at the kitchen table, when you feel like you're the imposter at the office or at your local church congregation or at your sporting event, when you feel like you're that imposter, sit back and appreciate those moments. Recognize that you may be farther along in the process and not have as much results as the people sitting next to you. But if you keep putting in that time and effort and you keep striving for that success, it will come. And at the end of the day, your success needs to be measured by you and you alone. You need to be willing to say, I have been successful because of X, Y, or Z. Don't let anyone else define your success. You live up to it. Don't let the world tear you down because you are not successful in the terms of monetary value or anything else. Make sure you are defining your success. Guys, that's what I got for you in today's episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast. Make sure to always leave a 5-star review if you have not, and share it with somebody who you feel like could benefit from today's episode. And with that all being said, we will see you next week.